We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
Over 100,000 American workers just lost their jobs. And it wasn't because of China, automation, or outsourcing. It was because of a decision made in Washington. Can a seemingly pro-America policy actually tear apart American industry? Stay tuned, because the truth might surprise you. Trump's 50% aluminum tariff. Was it meant to protect American jobs? Or was it a ticking time bomb, set to explode on the very people it aimed to help? Let's break down what happened and why it's a game changer. Number 1. The start of it all. A big decision. Let's rewind to June 4th, 2025. A day that would go down in history as one of the most controversial moments in U.S. economic policy. On this fateful day, former President Donald Trump made a bold and sweeping decision that would send shockwaves through industries, families, and communities across the country. With the stroke of a pen, he signed an executive order that would double aluminum tariffs from 25% to an eye-watering 50%. The stated goal was clear: protect national security and bring jobs back to American soil. Sounds like a noble cause, right? After all, who wouldn't want to see jobs return to U.S. workers, particularly in struggling industrial sectors? But, as we would soon learn, this wasn't just a move to bolster American industry. It would become a ticking time bomb with devastating consequences. Number 2. The immediate fallout. Loss of jobs and economic shockwaves. Within mere weeks of the tariff's implementation, the fallout was undeniable and devastating. The numbers: shocking. Over 100,000 jobs were lost across multiple sectors, a scale of destruction that seemed unimaginable just days before. Alcoa, one of the nation's largest aluminum producers, issued a grim warning that the tariff could wipe out up to 100,000 positions. Jobs that sustained entire families, neighborhoods, and communities. Imagine that. 100,000 people, your neighbors, your friends, maybe even your own family members, suddenly out of work. A ripple effect was set in motion, and it spread far beyond the smelting plants where aluminum is processed. Smelting plants were hit hard, yes, but the true devastation went far beyond that. The shockwaves began to spread to other industries that relied heavily on affordable aluminum. Home builders found themselves unable to source the materials needed to continue construction, sending housing projects into a halt. Auto manufacturers, already struggling with rising costs, faced mounting pressure as the price of aluminum skyrocketed, forcing them to raise prices or lay off workers. And then there's the beer industry. Yes, even your local brewery. Aluminum cans, a key component in the production of beverages, became prohibitively expensive. What followed was a wave of price hikes, layoffs, and shutdowns that rippled through the economy. Every time you turned on the news, another company, another town, another industry was facing the same fate: layoffs, plant closures, or worse, bankruptcy. It wasn't just an economic issue. It was a social crisis unfolding in real time. Communities, particularly in the Rust Belt, began to feel the full weight of this decision. It wasn't just numbers on a screen. It was people's lives, families torn apart, and towns that relied on these commie industries to survive. But here's the real question: why did this happen? How did a policy designed to protect American jobs and boost domestic industry end up creating such a devastating aftermath? How could something that seemed so beneficial on the surface end up inflicting so much pain? Stick around, because the answer might just surprise you. Number 3. The hidden cost. Price surge and supply chain collapse. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of how this tariff started to collapse the very industries it was supposed to protect. Smelting aluminum is no simple process. It's incredibly energy-intensive. Think about it. To extract aluminum from ore, you need vast amounts of electricity. In the US, Industrial electricity prices already sit at an average of 8.21 cents per kilowatt hour. Not cheap, right? But here's the kicker. In Canada, where a large portion of aluminum is smelted, electricity costs are a fraction of that, just 2 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour. When you're dealing with high-energy processes like smelting, that difference is not just a small gap. It's a yawning chasm. And that's where the problem starts. It doesn't take a business genius to figure out what happens next. US smelters can't compete. With a cost disadvantage this huge, US aluminum producers were at a major disadvantage before the tariff even hit. So, what does that mean for American industries relying on cheap aluminum? Well, as the price of aluminum shot up due to the tariff, the cost of everything that depended on it, cars, homes, canned goods, became more expensive. And who gets stuck with the bill? The average American consumer and, you guessed it, workers. Now, industries had a tough choice to make. They could either absorb the rising costs, which would eat into their profits and potentially drive them out of business, or they could pass those costs on to consumers, risking a further decrease in demand. The third option? Lay off workers. And that's exactly what happened. It didn't take long for companies to start slashing jobs to stay afloat, leaving thousands unemployed. Manufacturing plants, once buzzing with activity, now stood silent. What was supposed to be a boost for American workers ended up putting even more pressure on an already fragile workforce. Here's the real kicker. As energy costs soared and aluminum prices continued to climb, the entire supply chain started to collapse under the strain. Every single sector that depended on aluminum, auto manufacturing, home building, even beverage production felt the sting. Companies were forced to make impossible decisions. Should they raise prices and risk losing customers, or fire workers to save their bottom line? Either way, the result was the same: layoffs, layoffs, and more layoffs. The economic domino effect was in full swing, and it didn't show any sign of stopping. Number 4. The global backlash. Allies and trade partners react. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture. The decision to slap a 50% tariff on aluminum wasn't just an internal issue for the US. It sent ripples across the globe, and not in a good way. Canada, our closest neighbor and longtime trade ally, didn't take kindly to Trump's move. You see, Canada is one of the biggest aluminum exporters to the US, and with the stroke of a pen, that trade was thrown into jeopardy. Canada didn't just sit back and accept it. No, they hit back hard, imposing their own tariffs on American goods in retaliation. The European Union, which has its own vested interests in the aluminum market, followed suit with tariffs of their own. And South Korea, another key ally, joined the fray, adding pressure to the situation. Suddenly, the tariff that was supposed to protect American jobs turned into a full-scale trade dispute with some of our closest allies. But here's where it gets even more dangerous. This wasn't just an economic issue. It was a geopolitical one. The US had opened up a Pandora's box, and once it was open, there was no going back. Countries that had been working with the US for decades on trade and security matters were now forced to reconsider their relationship with Washington. Was this a one-off incident? Or was the US really prepared to push the entire world into a new age of protectionism? Suddenly, we were at a crossroads, where trade tensions could easily spiral into something much more serious. Countries that were once staunch allies were now reassessing their future with the US, and the ramifications could be far-reaching. It wasn't just about aluminum anymore. It was about trust, international cooperation, and the delicate balance of global diplomacy. This wasn't the kind of situation you could fix with a simple phone call or a handshake at a trade summit. No, this was a serious breach, and it could threaten not just trade deals, but long-standing political relationships. So, here's the big question. Could this aggressive protectionism, this America First policy, lead to a full-blown trade war? Could the world's economy shift into uncharted waters? Stay with us as we explore the global implications and what happens when the US takes on the rest of the world. Number 5. The ripple effect. Impact on local communities and industries. As the tariffs began to take hold, the effects didn't stay confined to the boardrooms or news headlines. They rippled out, touching the lives of everyday Americans in ways that were both swift and unforgiving. Local communities, particularly those heavily dependent on industries like aluminum production, began to feel the real, tangible consequences of these policies. The immediate impact was stark. Tax revenues plummeted, sending local governments into a scramble to figure out how to maintain essential services. Municipalities that once relied on the steady stream of taxes from factories and plants suddenly saw their budgets shrink. And with that, the ability to fund things like schools, roads, and emergency services. Imagine trying to keep your town running when your main source of income has been wiped out overnight. Consumer spending took a sharp downturn as well. When workers are laid off in massive waves, their purchasing power evaporates. People aren't buying new cars, they're not remodeling their homes, and they're certainly not stocking up on goods at the local stores. The ripple effect cascaded through entire regions, as everything from home sales to restaurant visits saw declines. Small businesses, the backbone of many communities, felt the weight of this loss. How could they survive when their customers suddenly had less money to spend? The answer was simple. Many didn't. Businesses closed their doors, unemployment soared, and towns that once thrived on industry found themselves struggling to stay afloat. This wasn't just an economic problem. It was a societal one. As jobs evaporated, social safety nets became overwhelmed. Families lost their sense of security. Children grew up in communities with fewer opportunities, and the social fabric of towns and cities began to unravel. These weren't just abstract numbers we were talking about. These were real people, with real lives, watching as their communities crumbled under the weight of a policy meant to protect them. Think about it for a moment. What happens when the very heart of a community, the factories, the workers, the jobs that families depend on, suddenly collapses? What happens when everything you've known, the place that shaped your life and your future, starts to disappear? It's more than just a lost paycheck. It's the destruction of a way of life, the erosion of the dreams and stability that generations built. And in the aftermath, it's not just the economy that's affected. It's everything that holds a community together. Number 6. The political play. Trump's economic revival plan. Let's take a step back for a moment and look at this from a different angle. Was this tariff truly a carefully crafted economic strategy? Or was it part of something much bigger? Trump's broader political agenda? On the surface, it seemed like a straightforward move designed to revitalize American industry and protect domestic jobs. But some political insiders suggest there might have been more at play here than just economics. Was this tariff a genuine effort to fix the US economy? Or was it a calculated political maneuver to reclaim the Rust Belt states that played a pivotal role in Trump's 2016 victory? In the cutthroat world of politics, some policies aren't just about solving problems. They're about sending messages, creating narratives, and, ultimately, winning votes. Think about it. The Rust Belt region, which includes key swing states like Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, had been hit hard by years of deindustrialization. These areas, once the lifeblood of American manufacturing, were struggling to regain their footing. What better way to appeal to voters in these states than by promising to bring jobs back to the heart of American industry? By implementing tariffs, Trump made a bold statement. America would no longer let foreign powers dictate its economic fate. It was protectionism at its finest, and it played well to voters who had watched their jobs disappear to foreign competition. But here's the twist. Was this about protecting American jobs, or was it more about sending a message to those key voters? Some argue that this was less about fixing the economy and more about leveraging a hot-button issue to rally political support. After all, it's easy to campaign on America first when the country's economic future is at stake, right? The question becomes, was this tariff a smart political move? Or was it a reckless gamble? One that put not just American workers, but Trump's entire political future on the line. So, let's ask the hard question here. Was this move a stroke of political genius? A way to secure those critical swing states and boost Trump's chances in the next election? Or was it an economic disaster waiting to unfold? One that could undermine the very support he was trying to build? Stay with us as we explore the fallout, because the real political consequences of this decision might be even bigger than the economic ones. Number 7. The solution. Can the US overcome this? So, what's the solution to all of this? How does the US climb out of the economic hole it's dug for itself with these tariffs? Some experts suggest that the answer lies in smart, forward-thinking investments, particularly in energy solutions and infrastructure. The truth is, the US can't compete with countries like Canada when it comes to low-cost energy, not without overhauling the energy sector. Smarter, more efficient energy systems could level the playing field and make US manufacturing competitive again without relying on protectionist tariffs. It's a long-term play, but one that could provide sustainable growth for years to come. Some argue that lowering Canadian tariffs or negotiating better trade deals might help in the short term. But even that is a band-aid solution. Real change would require a complete shift in policy, moving away from short-term fixes like tariffs and toward a more strategic, long-term approach to US industrial growth. The question becomes, can we afford to wait for such reforms to take root? Or are we stuck in a cycle of quick fixes that only make the problem worse? But let's not kid ourselves. What if the US continues down this path? What if we keep doubling down on tariffs and protectionism, thinking that this is the magic bullet to revive American industry? What happens when this policy doesn't just fail to deliver, but exacerbates the very problems it's trying to solve? The consequences could be even worse than we've seen so far. Is it too late to fix the damage done? Can we still turn this ship around? Or has the window for real reform already closed? Stick with us as we dive into the final thoughts on what the future holds for American trade and economy. The big question: protecting America or hurting it? In the end, there's a question we all need to seriously ask ourselves. Was this protectionism, or was it self-inflicted harm? Trump's aluminum tariff might have been sold to the American public as a shield for American jobs, but it's quickly becoming clear. It's acting more like a wrecking ball, tearing down the very industries it was supposed to protect. What started as an effort to safeguard workers in the US has evolved into a policy that's left communities in shambles, industries in crisis, and jobs hanging by a thread. As we look to the future, it's clear that a smarter, more nuanced approach is needed, one that doesn't rely on tariffs as a crutch, but focuses on sustainable growth, innovation, and real solutions for the American economy. We need a path forward that protects American workers, but also strengthens our position in the global market without isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. So, what do you think? Was this tariff a disaster waiting to happen? Or was it the beginning of a new era for American trade, one that could reshape our economic future? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Did Trump's policy do more harm than good? Or was it just the first step in a larger strategy? And if you want more jaw-dropping insights into the world's biggest economic stories, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The next video will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about global trade.